Richard, firstly, welcome. Thank you for joining us. You describe yourself as being, in 1983, the founder of the free software movement. Exactly what is all that?
The first thing you need to make a computer do anything is an operating system. If you haven't got an operating system, it won't run at all. And at that time, all the operating systems for modern computers were proprietary software. That means non-free software. The users were kept divided and helpless. So I was an operating system developer, and I said, I'm going to change this. I couldn't convince countries' governments to change these disgusting laws. I couldn't convince companies to change their policies, but I could write software. So I said, I'm going to write another operating system with the help of anyone I can convince to help me. And this operating system is going to respect users' freedom. It's going to give people a way to use computers in freedom. And this operating system, I gave the name GNU. So in January 1984, I started developing the GNU operating system. And by the early 90s, we had almost all the pieces necessary. But one important piece was missing, which was the kernel, the component, the program that allocates the computer's resources to all the other programs that you use. And at that point, Linus Torvalds wrote a kernel called Linux, and in 1992 he made it free software. So at that point, Linux filled the last gap in the GNU system, and the combination, which was basically GNU with Linux added, started becoming popular, and so we achieved our goal. We made it possible to use a computer in freedom. But as this combined GNU plus Linux system became popular and millions of people started using it, the idea of freedom got lost for most of them. Most of them started saying, here's this really exciting operating system. It's powerful, it's reliable, and you can get it cheap, and you can learn all about it, and you can do what you like. It's really cool. But they didn't tell other people that this is a way you can live in freedom. So that began to be forgotten by most of our community, not everybody. However, as that proceeded, in 1998, some of the people who didn't think very much about freedom as a goal, they started describing our software in another way. They started calling it open source as a way they could talk about our software in our community without mentioning freedom as an issue. So today, the free software movement is still here. There are more of us than there were before, of course, but there are now tens of millions of people using our work who don't know why we did it. So today our main work actually is talking to the people who already use our software and already know how good it is, and explaining to them that this is more than just a powerful, reliable system. It's actually a way you can live in freedom and have the freedom to form a community and help other people too.
So a lot of people say free software is open source, but not necessarily all open source software is free. Tell us a bit more with regards to your feelings with regards to the whole idea of open source.
Well, I don't really like to talk very much about open source. It's a shallower view of the work that we do, where we say that software ethically must respect your freedom and respect specifically your freedom to cooperate with other people and as a community take control of your computers. They just say that if people let you look at the source code and change it, it'll make the software technically better. Well, that may be true, but it's less important. Imagine people arguing about whether free elections where everyone's allowed to vote would be better or worse for the economy. They're missing the point. They might come to the right conclusion, they might support free elections where everyone's allowed to vote. Even so, their arguments would be weak ones. And if we let such important things rest on mere economics, mere short-term practicality, that means we've lost sight of what's really important.
What would you say to people who don't want to use the term free because it implies free of charge? I mean, take Microsoft who say, yeah, free like a puppy. What's your opinion on that?
They're just being silly. people are well aware that free software means free as in free speech, not free as in free beer. It only takes about 3 seconds to say that to people, and it isn't hard for them to understand. Now, I've discovered that most people who hear the term open source misunderstand it. The official definition of open source by the people who started that way of talking about things is pretty similar to the definition of free software. It's not written the same way, and it's interpreted by different people, so they've drawn the line at different places. But it was meant to be more or less similar to the definition of free software. But you'll find that most people seem to think only that it means only that you can look at the source code. Now, that's a much weaker criterion, and it's a really drastic misunderstanding. So I hope that in your show you'll help correct that misunderstanding. But it's really much clearer to tell people free software. It's true that there's a misunderstanding they could have, but that misunderstanding is qualitatively totally different from the right understanding. So it's really easy to point out to people which one's the right meaning and which one's the wrong meaning, and once they've thought that through, they won't get confused.
I happened to watch a couple of days ago the one movie which you appeared in, Revolution OS. And there was one thing which I wanted to talk to you about where, with regards to the homebrew computing journal, that one aspect in that DVD. And it referred to how when Bill Gates wrote an open letter into homebrew, he said that how on earth do you expect to make money out of this? You know, as a programmer, you study for this and you're making the equivalent of $2 an hour.
I don't think it's an important question. I don't really concern myself with how much or how little money Bill Gates makes. All I'll observe is that he has enough money to know where his next few million meals are coming from. So really, it doesn't seem to matter. But basically, why would we be concerned about this question? There's a whole implicit chain of reasoning that they expect you to rush through in your head without looking at it carefully. So let's look at it slowly so we can see where its weaknesses are. They first expect you to assume that unless people are well paid to write software, they won't do it. That's where their assumption starts. So then they expect us to want to have lots of software, and that's all we want, they assume. We don't care if that software respects our freedom or takes away our freedom, just as long as it's there and it runs. That's the second assumption. So then, if those two assumptions are true, if that's really what one factual and one assumption about what we want, then we would get to the conclusion that in order to have more software, we should give up our freedom so that the developers of software can have power over us and make us pay them a lot of money, and then we'll have software. We've given up our freedom, but we don't care about that. We just have software we can run. Well, the first of these assumptions is factually false. There are about 1 million developers of free software now, and we're developing lots of software. So that assumption's false. Now, the second assumption is about what our values are. And of course, your values could be different from my values, but I'll just tell you that my values are I don't want software if it doesn't respect my freedom. In fact, I so much don't want it that I won't take it. If somebody offers me a program, but only on the condition that I promise I will not share it with you, then I'm going to tell him no. I'm going to tell him that to be a good neighbor, I have to refuse that software, and I will refuse it. So these two assumptions are both wrong, and the free software community's success proves how wrong they are.
In South Africa, we have quite a big problem with regards to software piracy. People copying proprietary software illegally.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. Piracy is attacking ships, and I don't think that they do it with software. And I haven't heard it's very rampant in the area of South Africa. In the Caribbean and in Southeast Asia, I believe those are the big hotspots for piracy. And it's a really bad thing. The pirates kill the entire crews of the ships that they attack. So that's a very bad thing. But sharing copies of software is everybody's natural right, and nobody should ever take that away. The problem you have is not that people are copying software. It's that people have software which doesn't come with source code, which they can't study, they can't change, and which it's illegal for them to share. Of course, they do it anyway, but those laws have as much moral validity as the past laws.
Well, then let's talk about copyright versus copyleft. What's the distinguishing factors?
Well, they're completely different because copyright is a law, whereas copyleft is a technique that I came up with as a way to use copyright to protect people's freedom. See, usually copyright is used to take away your freedom. By default, when something is copyrighted, that means you're forbidden to copy it or distribute it or change it. But I recognize that I could use copyright law to protect your freedom to do exactly those things. So here's how I do it. The software that I've written, and most free software actually uses the same technique, it's copyrighted, and the first thing you'll see is a copyright notice reminding you of that. And this means that by default, it would be forbidden, legally forbidden, for you to copy it or distribute it or modify it. Of course, it would be unethical to stop you, but that's what the law would say. But then I say, you are authorized to copy this. You're authorized to distribute the copies. You're authorized to modify it. You're authorized to publish your modified version. But there is a condition that any version you distribute, modified or unmodified, extended or whatever, any program that contains any substantial amount of my program, you must distribute under these same conditions, no more and no less. And you must make the source code available to the users, which means that they get from you the same freedoms that you got from me. And thus, the freedom is passed on to every user. So, any given free software license is a license that operates under copyright law. It gives you permission to copy and modify and publish modified versions. Some free software licenses are copyleft licenses. Those are the ones that say that what you distribute has to be under the same terms. So these licenses say modified versions must be free. There are other free software licenses that do not have copyleft, and they permit proprietary versions of the software. The license that I wrote, the GNU General Public License, or GNU GPL for short, is used, I'm told, by something around 70% or maybe more of all free software packages. And for those open source fans, I guess it would be 70 or so % of all open source packages. Of course, that still leaves plenty of others. There are a number of other free software licenses. Some use copyleft and some don't.
We form part of the continent of Africa, a developing world. How do you see the free software movement assisting in the improvement of the continent, as well as places like Brazil, for instance?
Well, freedom is just as important for people in poor countries as for people in rich countries. So the freedoms that free software respects are the moral entitlement of every computer user in Africa, in South America, and in North America, and wherever. However, there's a secondary benefit which is especially important in poor countries, which is because you are free to redistribute it, you can, if you like, make lots of copies and spread them around. You can set up a distribution tree. You can, if you like, give people copies gratis. You can also sell them, but in this case, the crucial point is you can give people copies gratis. And people don't have to pay for permission to run the software. The developers of proprietary software are charging monopoly rents, each and every one of them, because they have a monopoly on distributing each one of those programs. And this, when a company has power over you, they use it to squeeze money out of you. Now, in North America, that squeezing is something most people can cope with. Well, most of North America, not Mexico. But in Africa, most people who can get a computer can't possibly afford those fees. So it's really good that they can find a neighbor who has a free operating system like the GNU plus Linux system, and the neighbor can legally give him a copy of this software. They can share with each other in a way that's natural for human beings to do with their friends, and they don't have to fear the information police. And so every school in Africa, when it gets a computer, should insist on using free software, because these schools should not be teaching people to be helplessly dependent on proprietary software. You quoted Bill Gates once. I'd like to mention another thing that he said. He said that the unauthorized copies of Windows would act to get users addicted, and eventually Microsoft would find a way to charge them. So schools should not provide Windows or any other non-free software to the students any more than they'd provide free packs of cigarettes to the students. Schools should be training people to grow up and live in freedom and recognize and value freedom and maintain freedom in their country, which means teach students to use free software.
I'd like to know, what is your view on what might happen in the next 5 years with regards to the free software movement and getting that mindset into the general public?
I can't see the future. My crystal ball is cloudy today. What I know about are the things that are happening today, both those that provide us with hope and those that threaten us. What I see is that the use of free software is spreading, it's catching on in more places. But at the same time, I see that most of the people who are talking about it, using it, and encouraging other people to use it do not talk about freedom as the reason why. Now, those people may succeed in convincing more people to use free software, and that's a good thing, but that's weak. It doesn't build a foundation for our community to be strong, because a community of people who use free software because it's convenient, well, as soon as someone offers them a proprietary program that's convenient, they might switch. But people who've come to recognize that free software means you have freedom, that using free software means you're cooperating with your community, that you're ready to help your neighbors if they want your help, these people are going to resist very hard if anybody tries to make them use non-free software. So those are the people who will really fight for freedom. And history shows that sometimes you really have to fight for freedom. It doesn't defend itself automatically. There's only one national anthem in the world that makes me want to cry when I hear it, and that's yours.
Why?
Because of the fight for freedom that it's the result of.
What were your impressions of Brazil when you have visited there recently?
Well, I wasn't in Brazil recently. I think it was a year ago or more that I was in Brazil, but I'm happy to see the way the government is increasingly sustaining free software. And now Venezuela is also adopting policies to push free software use. And every country should invest in switching to free software. Every government should realize that the sooner they spend the money to move society out of this track, which leads to a train wreck, and into this other track towards freedom, the more benefit they're going to get, and the less it's going to cost to escape.
What final message would you like to send to viewers which will be watching this program here?
Freedom is in danger all around the world today. It's in danger from governments that say they're protecting us from terrorism or from pornography or whatever the threat of the day happens to be. And we all have to be vigilant and insist in maintaining our freedom above all. Free software is one part of a much broader campaign for freedom. I'm happy that I took the campaign for human rights into the area of computer use, into the area of how we use software. But the broader fight for human rights and civil liberties is still going on. We need your help.
Richard, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.